we'll watch that video again to help you to remember. All that the video is for is to help you when you're taking the test or something like that. It might help you to remember what the order is. Instead of having to just memorize it, the song sometimes might help a few people to remember it. Okay, so let's do our problem of the day. And then we can... So the essential question for chapter 7 is all about patterns. So some of the lessons that we're going to do in this chapter are about looking for a pattern, figuring out what the next number might be in a pattern, or figuring out what the next shape might look like, or how many sides the next figure might have. Those are some of the things that we're going to do in this chapter also. Okay? Here's your problem of the day. I'm going to let you think about it for a minute by yourself, and then I'll have you talk to somebody and see if you can figure it out together. Here's what it says. 2 sides of an octagonal flower garden are each 3 8/10 meters long. The rest of the sides measure 2 6 meters each. 2 6/10 meters each. How much fencing material will be needed to enclose the garden? The first thing we need to know is, what does this word mean? How many sides do you think an octagonal shape might have, Nolan?
8-sided.
It's 8-sided. Yes. So octagon is an 8-sided figure. So that would mean you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So maybe on your paper, it's like a stop sign. So you can try to draw that octagonal shape. 2 of the sides are this long. Whatever 2 sides you want. And then the rest of the sides are this long. And it asks about, we're looking at perimeter, right? Perimeter is how much fencing will be needed to go around the shape. It's not necessarily what's here on the inside of the shape. It's how much fencing would be needed to enclose that shape of a garden. Okay, so maybe you might use, you could use adding, right? You could just use addition and go all the way around and add them all up. What's another way you could solve this? What do you think?
Another way you could solve it is multiplication. You do 3 8/10 times 2 plus 2 6/10 times 6.
So here's pretty much what he was saying. If you take 3 8/10 times 2, and then you add with it 2 6/10 times 6. Right? Kind of looks like order of operations a little bit. So we're going to do what's in the parentheses first, and then we're going to add them together. As I said, you could do it another way. You could just go around and add it all up, but this seems like it'll probably be a quicker way. 3 8/10 times 2, and then 2 6/10 times 6. So try it by yourself first, and then we'll have you check your answer with someone. Here, have a look. 3 8/10 times 2. 2 times 8 is 16. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 more is 7. And then we have 1 decimal place, so 1 decimal place here. I'm gonna erase this picture. Then we'll multiply the next part. Remember with what we just were talking about, we would do the parentheses first. That's the order of operations. So next thing is 2 6/10 times 6. Those are the other 6 sides of the shape. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 2 is 12. Plus 3 more is 15. And then we have 1 decimal point there, 1 here. And then we can add these together. Remember that when we add decimals, we line up the decimal point, remember? So 6 and 6 is 12. 5 and 7, 5 plus 1 plus 7 would be 13. And then 1 plus 1 is 2, and then you just drop down the decimal point. So then your total answer, your final answer should be 23 2/10. So look over at your notes. Let's see. Here's what I need you to write in your notes. Chapter 7, Lesson 2. Make sure you write that, because then when you go back to study, you can always look to see which lesson you're studying for. Then I need you to write at the top the title of our lesson, which is Order of Operations. So remember, an operation is multiply, divide, add, or subtract. And so it is the order in which you do those parts of the math problem. So remember what we heard on the song that we just watched. The first thing is parenthesis. I better put the P right there. So P stands for parenthesis. E stands for exponents. M and the D stands for multiply and divide. And then the A and the S stands for add and subtract. Yep. So P stands for parentheses, E stands for exponents, then the M and the D are for multiply and divide, and the A and the S are for add and subtract. Now, the reason why those two go together, the M and the D, and then the A and the S, we have them in that specific order because that's what makes sense for us to remember it, to help us to remember it. But the reason why I put them together is because the multiply or divide, it's whichever one comes first in the problem from left to right. So the way that you read a book, going from left to right, it's the same way when you're reading the math problem. So you first do the parenthesis, you second do anything that's in the exponents, any of the exponents, and then next you would do multiplying or dividing, whichever comes first as you work your way across the problem, and then you would do any of the adding or subtracting as you work your way across the problem. Okay, so the multiply and divide are together, and the add and subtract are together. So if you have a multiplication part of the problem, and you have an addition part of the problem, the multiplication part is going to come before the addition. Unless the addition is in the parentheses, right? Because it's whatever comes in the parentheses what goes first. So we're going to do several examples too in a moment after everybody's able to copy this down. And we'll go through some examples where we're using all of those things so that it makes more sense to you. But this is a review, so it's something you've done before. You probably just needed a refresher a little bit. So I'll give you another second to copy all this. Then we'll do an example. Here's our first example. We're going to have, oops, uh-oh, not again. No. Let's see, 36 minus 10 is inside of a parenthesis. Then we have plus 5 times 2 to the second power. So we're going to go through what we just learned. Sometimes I'll write it this way too, just to remind that the M and the D stand for multiply and divide, and they're not really one after the other, they're side by side on the same line. Same with addition and subtraction. So we start with parentheses. So we're going to do everything that's in the parentheses, both of the parentheses. Then we're going to rewrite the problem underneath. So that's where some people are going to not want to do that. But if you don't rewrite the problem each time you work a piece of it out, it starts to get really confusing. So this one, not so much because there's not as many pieces to it. But some of the problems you're going to see are super long, and you have to go through and try to rewrite. Like on the video, it showed they would take like the 4 times 2 and they'd make it an 8 instead of, and then they'd rewrite it and show you what the problem looked like once you made that an 8. So once you've solved a piece, you should rewrite it. Makes more sense that way. So we're going to do both of the parentheses first. 36 minus 10 gives me what? 26. Now I still have 5 times 2 to the second power in the other parenthesis. 2 to the second power, what does that equal?
4.
Because it's 2 times 2, right? So this really equals 4. I'm going to make this a 4. And 5 times 4 is 20. So now I have 26 plus 20, which is 46. Now, I gave you that one because that one was a little easier. And then we're going to work our way into some harder ones.
Can I do 5
Yes.
times 2?
No. No. Here's what she asked. Good question. She said, can't I do 5 times 2 equals 10, and then 10 to the second power? It doesn't always work like that. So because this was a number to the second power, and because it was multiplication in there, That's the reason why it worked. If that wasn't the case, don't do it like that. Do what's with the base and the exponent, like what we learned, and then do the other part of the parentheses. This isn't, that's an E. All right, here's your next example. Remember I told you we're going to do several examples here. So again, we're going to start with parentheses first, then exponents. The parentheses are there to show you what to do first. So sometimes you're going to see a problem that doesn't have a parenthesis. If it doesn't have a parenthesis, you just move on to the second part. Okay, so you go through, not every problem is going to have parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Not every, some problems will, but not every problem will. So if you get to a problem that doesn't have one of these things, you just go on to the next one. So in this case, we do have a parenthesis and we have an exponent inside the parenthesis. So we're going to do both of those. So 9 to the second power, does that equal 18? I heard some yeses and I hear some no's. 9 to the second power really means 9 times 9, right? It doesn't mean 9 times 2. It means 9 times 9. So it's the 9 twice, like 2 times. So 9 times 9 would be 81. Then we're going to subtract 4 from that, and then we're going to multiply it all by 6. So far I've just done one piece of the parentheses. See how I rewrote it? It just takes a second, and it's really helpful to make sure you're staying organized. So 81 minus 4, what do I have there? What do I have there? Angelina? 77. I knew you'd have it. 77, and then we're going to multiply. I just brought everything else down around it, so now it's going to be 6 times 77. 9, it's not 9 times 2, it's 9 times 9. This was from chapter 1. I know it's been a while. We've done exponents, but it was way back when in chapter 1. You just can't forget about it. So it was back in chapter 1. So then my final answer would be 462 on this one. It was a long time ago. Okay, let's do another one. Bless you. Okay. All right, here's next example. I'm going to give you a longer one here.
She does what she wants. She's the adult in the room.
So here's an example of one, listen, that does not have parentheses.
I can do this one.
So, hold on. Aiden, raise your hand, and then I'm going to call on you. Then you're going to say what you just said. Okay, raise your hand. Aiden. Add parentheses, is that what you say? He says we should add some parentheses. And we can do that. Sometimes when you have, because this problem says 7 times 10 plus 3 times 30. So if we just started at one side of the problem and worked our way through, what order would we be doing here? We would be doing multiplying, then adding, and then multiplying again. And if we remember the order, it's multiply and divide first, and then add and subtract. So we have to do all the multiplication parts of this problem before we do any of the addition parts of this problem. So Aiden's idea of adding some parentheses in here is actually a really good idea. So we should do that part first, and then that part first. And whatever we get in the first set of parentheses, we will add to whatever we get in the second part of the parentheses. Okay? So 7 times 10 is 70. 3 times 30 is 90. And then if we add that together, we would get 160, right? So do you see how Do you see how adding the parentheses helped us to figure this one out? So even though it didn't have parentheses in it, we added them in to make sure that we did everything in the right way. So let's see what would have happened if we would have answered this in the wrong way. So don't write this in your notes. I just want you to see it. Go ahead and sharpen your pencil while I write this in. Oops. Okay, so watch. Yes, that's what we just did. Okay, watch this. What if we do this without using order of operations? You will, but I want to show you why. If we did 7 times 10 and we got 70, 70 plus 3 would be 73, and then we'd multiply that by 30. I'm just trying to show you how you do not get the same answer. Not the same answer, right? We got 160 last time. So that's why I told you to not write this in your notes, because it's not the right way. Some people will say, I'm just going to do it from left to right and put that answer. If you do that, you will not get the right answer. That's why it's important. So what we did here on this one, we added some parentheses, so we did the multiplying before we did the addition. Okay, let's do another example. Write this in your notes. This one is super long. Oh, just wait.
I think it's called brackets.
Whoa, look at him. He's got some good vocabulary there.
Parentheses, brackets, and I forget what the other thing is called.
The other thing is called a brace. So, watch this. It's really not as bad as you think.
Actually, it's not. It's not. I see what's going on. Nothing's bad. I see what's going on. It's not that bad.
Listen up. Listen up. Listen up. Listen up. Basically, a parenthesis, a bracket, and a brace all do the same thing. So the parenthesis is the curved line that we're used to seeing. The bracket is the one that looks like the side of a square.
If you've ever had braces, you know.
And a brace is going to be the big one with the little curly thing in the middle. Okay? So basically, what that means is we're going to go all the way to the inside. So all of these things here are within the brace. But then inside the bracket, you have this little piece just right here. And then inside the parenthesis is just the 5 minus 2. So just imagine if all they used was parentheses, it would look really confusing. So if you replace all of those with parentheses, you're going to have a bunch of parentheses and you're not going to know what it is. Okay? I need every single one of your attention up on this screen because I'm feeling like some people they're starting to chit-chat with their neighbors. If you have a question about what I'm saying, I need you to raise your hand and wait till I call on you, and then you ask the question so everybody can hear. If you're asking your neighbor a question, then you guys, neither one of you are listening to what I'm saying, and then people are calling out questions. So just listen really closely to what I'm saying. If you have a question, then raise your hand, and when I'm finished with my sentence, I will ask you what you need, and then you can ask me your question so everybody can hear. All of these are all the same as parentheses. It just means it's just a little bit further out. So we have to go all the way to the center to start with the P for parentheses. Okay, so the center is right here, 5 minus 2, and that gives us 3. Then I'm going to rewrite what I have here. I'm just rewriting everything else that was around it. So all I did was I took this 5 plus 2 and I turned it into that, 5 minus 2 and I turned it into the 3. Now I'm going to go out a little bit further, and I have in this bracket, I have 1 times 3, which is 3.
3 times 3 is 9.
So I'm still on this part of the acronym, right? I'm still on that part. I'm still on parentheses. I'm trying to just sort through all the little pieces that are inside of the parentheses. So now I have 3 times 3, which is 9. And I'm going to add with that whatever 2 to the second power is. Now 2 to the second power, what does that equal? Amy, what does that equal? 4. So now I end up with 4 plus 9. So my final answer to this one is just 13. So it's basically taking all of those pieces. Now we did some subtraction before we did multiplication. Did anybody catch that? Now the only right, that's the only reason why you just have to do whatever's in the parentheses first. So that's what I don't want you to be confused. We always do multiplying before addition or subtraction, only if it's not in the parentheses, the way it was the last question I showed you. Okay? So you have, on these ones, you're going to see some with the brackets and the braces, and all it is go straight for the parentheses. That will come first, and then the brackets, and then the braces. So if you want to write something maybe in your notes to help you remember that, maybe next to the P for parentheses, you'll put what a parenthesis looks like, what a bracket looks like, and then what a brace looks like. Maybe if you feel confused on that, just to help you remember, the parenthesis means it's the very first thing you're going to do. The bracket would be the next part, which is the more squared, which, yeah, they won't write them in any other order than that. So it goes, parenthesis is the smallest, is like the very center, and then there'll be a bracket if there is one. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's only a parenthesis and a bracket and no brace, just depends. But that would be the order, and there's no more than that. So that would be the order.
Bigger than that? What if it needed like something else?
Sometimes they might have 2 sets of those, or sometimes they might have 2 sets of parentheses inside of there, or something like that. But those are the only 3 things we'll be looking at in these questions.
Yeah, but, do you have to do it in that order though? Say there
Yes.
were parentheses outside of the brace.
No, then you would do those parentheses as well, and then you would add everything together. Like maybe over here there was something like this, like a 3 or something, and that was in a parenthesis too. Is that what you're asking?
I mean, if there were parentheses outside of the brace.
That would be like this. This would be outside the brace.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean,
That's-
there was something else in it.
Oh, then you would just do all of those things, and then you just kind of keep dropping them all down until you end up with just numbers, like what we ended up with down here.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be in the order of parentheses in the center. It doesn't have to be that order though.
You would start with any parentheses that you have. Always the parentheses.
But what if it was parentheses inside and then parentheses outside of it?
You wouldn't have parentheses and then another. Yeah, it would be a parentheses and then a bracket and then a brace.
And then it might be another brace.
It might be.
That'd be
Okay, let's do another one. Let's do this one. This will be our last example. Then we'll look at your book questions. This one has a bracket and then a parenthesis inside of it. Remember, every question, still doing this order. So, start with parentheses. This parenthesis has an exponent inside. 5 to the second power is not 10, right? Because it doesn't mean 5 times 2. What is it, Malachi?
5 times 5.
5 times 5, which is really 25. Remember the little dot also means multiply?
How did you get really?
Okay, so I know that exponents are hard, but it's in your notes. So if exponents is where you're having a hard time, then when we get started with the lesson, I'm going to make you go back into your notes. I'm going to show you where you wrote it down. Because sometimes if you see it in your own handwriting, it'll make sense. We have notes on this, so I'll have you go back and look. But 5 to the second power doesn't mean 5 times 2. It means 5 times 5. It means
25.
Yes. So whatever this number is, you multiply it this many times. That's what an exponent is from way back when. So 5 times 5 is actually 25. So really what this means is 25 times 3. I'm just rewriting it as I solve pieces of it. So now I'm going to finish up the parentheses. Now it's 25 times 3, which is 75, minus 5 to the second power. And we already said what 5 to the second power was, wasn't it 25? because that's the same number again. So now we're doing 75 minus 25, which is 50, right? All I did was pull this down to this. Then I solved this to this. And now I need to subtract 55 minus 50, which is?
5.
So all of that just came down to equal 5. So here's where I started. 5 to the second power times 3, and that was the parentheses. So that really equaled 25 times 3, which equaled to 75. Pull down this other piece, because I can't mess with this 55 out here until I've solved everything from the inside of the parentheses and the brackets. So now 75 minus 5 to the second power, which is still 25, equals 50 when I do my subtracting. And now I can pull this out from the 55 and make it 55 minus 50. I tried to pull out some of the harder ones that you're going to see today. Not all of them have this many parts. Some of them are going to seem much easier. I tried to pull out some that had a lot of pieces to it. Okay, let's look at your assignment. We'll look at example number 1. You'll see some aren't as hard. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, here we go. Example number 1. Example number 1 says, listen up. Shh. The table shows the number of calories that are burned in 1 minute for 2 different activities. Nathan swims for 4 minutes and then runs for 8 minutes. How many calories has Nathan burned in all? So you burn 12 calories per minute by swimming and 10 calories per minute by running. So he swam for 4 minutes. That's where they got 12 times 4. And then he ran for 8 minutes, which is where they got 8 times 10. Really, like what Aiden said earlier, we could put some parentheses around those in order to make sure we keep those 2 pieces separate. Because we first want to do 12 times 4, which is what? Anybody know their 12s? Nolan? 48. And then 10 times 8, which is 80. And then we'll add those together. So see how we did the multiplying first? Because we used the acronym, remember? We used PEMDAS, so it would look like this. So there was no parentheses, but we ended up adding them. There was no exponents in this one, so we just skipped it. We did the multiplying. There was no dividing. And then we added, oops, that's an S. And there's no subtracting, see? So sometimes you just skip if there's nothing for that, like there was no exponents in this question, so I don't have to do that part. I just skip over it. So now 48 plus 80 would be 128 calories. So that's how many calories he burned altogether. So you don't just start from the left and work to the right. You have to use the order of operations, like what I showed you. All right, next example. This one has a lot harder things in it, right? This looks like one that we've already done. So they're asking you to first write the expression. We're going to fill in 4 plus 4 plus 10 divided by 2. So the 10 divided by 2 is actually in, do you see this part right here? This part is actually the part I'm going to do first because it's in the parentheses. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. And now I work my way a little bit further out, and now I'm at the brackets. And the brackets are now 4 times 5, which is 20. And now I'm out to where the braces were located. And the braces are 4 plus 20.
4 plus 5 is not 20. 4 plus 5 is not 20.
Oh, geez, sorry. Thanks. Thanks for stopping me, because that would have totally not worked out right. So I thought that was a multiplication sign. That would be 9. Now 4 plus 9. Got to look at the signs closer. 4 plus 9 would give us 13.
It says add, subtract.
I wasn't looking over there. And now 20 minus 13, what do you get? 7. So do you see how we did parentheses first, brackets second, braces third? So if you feel like in your notes you want to write that because maybe this part seems a little bit confusing to you, then you could write this. You could write under, like next to the P for parentheses, you can write that first you have the parenthesis, next you have the bracket, third you have the brace. That might help you to remember. Well, if you're going this way, left to right. Parentheses come first, brackets come second, brace comes third. So at the end, your final answer is 7 on this one. It's all about rewriting the question each time. So each time you solve a piece, you should rewrite the question and then bring everything else down around it, and then that should help you make sure you're solving them in the right order. What's hard is if people try to do them all in their head and then get an answer at the end. It makes it really hard. Don't try to do that. Okay? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to work on the guided practice question, this one. Once you get to the independent practice, you don't have all the little lines and stuff to help you, so you have to know what the order is. So this guided practice gives you some of the lines to show you where to bring things down and stuff like that. But once you get into the actual assignment, you don't see all that. So take advantage of having some of the lines to help you to remember. Once you get started on the assignment, we'll have 20 minutes to work. Remember, if you have questions about exponents, if you get to exponents, call me over and I can help you with that too, because I want to make sure if you get the wrong answer on an exponent and that's the second piece, once you get all the way down to like add and subtract, you've already got the problem wrong. So make sure you know how to do those. If you need help, I'll help you.